Well, now on that terrorism review, joining us is Ivor Roberts, a former head of counter-terror at the Foreign Office. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on Sky News. What were the there were something like 126 recommendations in total, as you know. What were the highlights for you? The people that we've been talking to earlier on today were particularly talking about data sharing between the intelligence services and the police.
Yes, I think that's always been a problem between MI5 and the police, to make sure that the intelligence that derives mainly from MI5 is properly shared. There's a sort of culture, something of a culture of hoarding information, which needs to be broken down. I think that one of the key recommendations concerns just that, of expanding data sharing and using technology in a much more advanced way, making fullest use of modern technology. And that, of course, has resource implications.
It is always somewhat alarming for the British public when they hear comments from our own Home Secretary suggesting that potentially attacks like we saw in Manchester that shocked the nation could have been avoided.
Well, I think there's several things to point out here. First of all, I think on this particular attack, the Manchester attack, the suspect was thought to be more criminal than terrorist, and it's sometimes a very, very fine judgment. Sometimes you're operating, as I think the head of MI5 once described it, as sort of pinpricks of light against a dark and shifting canvas, and it's sometimes not clear whether you're looking at terrorism or just straight ordinary criminality. So I think that it's a bit harsh to criticize too much. Of course, judgments are made, and sometimes judgments will be wrong. But it's a bit like standing at a tennis net and finding yourself having to field dozens of balls being rained down at you with a single racket, and you're going to intercept some, but some, unfortunately, will get through. And I think this year alone there's been 9 attacks, potential attacks intercepted, which is an impressive figure. But we've had a very bad year in terms of those attacks that have got through, and that's after several years when our neighbours in continental Europe have been the ones who've largely taken the brunt of this Islamist terrorist threat.
The report also concluded from David Anderson QC that in retrospect the intelligence could have been highly relevant to the planned attack in Manchester, and that Salman Abedi had been looked at a couple of times. He was due to be looked at again 9 days after what happened in Manchester. That is difficult, isn't it, for the nation to stomach?
It's difficult for the victims' families and friends to stomach. But unfortunately, as I say, the judgment was made that he was more criminal than terrorist, although, as you say, they had decided to put him through a review, which unfortunately, tragically really, was set 9 days after the attack itself. This is, I'm afraid, not everything can be stopped, and however much one would like in a free society, some things are going to get through, and it's a zero-sum game. If you decide to put surveillance on one person, you're effectively saying we are not going to put surveillance on another, because resources are inevitably limited.
Indeed so. I mean, 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing, is it not? We were speaking to Baroness Neville-Jones earlier on today, and her point was that 3 of the 6 people involved in these terror attacks were on the radar, if you will, and she found some comfort in that. She said that we were shining lights in the right dark corners, if you will.
Yes, I think Pauline's quite right, that we are helping to identify very dark areas, but we need to do even better, and that requires putting these recommendations, implementing them, and seeing what else can be done to deal with this terrorist threat with the present resources we have.
Given we are where we are, given we have these 126 recommendations, and the hope is that the security services and the police will talk more closely together, there is also the concern about domestic extremism on our shores and the rise of the far right. How concerned should we be about that?
I think the far right is something that has come into greater focus in recent months and years, and we need to deal with that threat as much as Islamist terrorism and other forms of terrorism. We've had a long tradition, if that doesn't sound too comfortable, of dealing with terrorism for most of my adult life, whether it's been the IRA or Middle East terrorism from Palestinian terrorist groups and Islamist groups now, and we've got to keep a close watch on far-right extremism, which can be equally toxic.
Sir Ivor Roberts, the former Head of Counter-Terror at the Foreign Office, we appreciate you taking the time to join us on Sky News this afternoon. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Other news, Labour has attacked the Prime Minister over the last 20